Like Andrew Denton. Cool. Cam's going to ask some questions as well.
Yeah.
Are you recording?
Yeah.
Okay. So, thanks for joining us, Stuart. Pretty informal sort of discussion, but I understand that you've got a pretty varied and diverse background in terms of practicing architecture. So if you could just give us a little introduction about yourself and your background, that'd be great.
Okay. I was in the industry when I was 19. I got my foot in the door purely as a tech background. I did AutoCAD during TAFE during high school. So when I left school, I had a year off to bum around, as most people do, and then I got a foot in the door, drafted straight away for Nettleton Tribe. Over the last 19 years, I've been in various number of firms, survived, I guess, a number of sort of downturns and enjoyed some highlights as well. So now I guess I'm associate for a medium-sized firm.
Okay. I guess this question is more in the context of the overall topic we're talking about, but in your experience, is continued growth and expansion of an organisation fundamental to their success?
I wouldn't say it's fundamental to a company's success to have continued growth. If you're just thinking of number of staff. Growth, if it comes to their own experience, growth if it comes to maybe specialising but pushing the envelope in that field, then yeah, that's certainly always best to reinvent yourself, to be on board with new technologies and reflect that within your designs if you're pushing yourself to be that sort of design-orientated firm. Growth numbers-wise, numbers of staff, I think it's best to be done organically. I think to inflate a company rapidly, pulling staff in to take on projects is a bit of a risk, because once those projects are done, if you haven't got a strong marketing team pulling in future work, well then there's going to be a rapid decline in staff if you can't maintain them. So I'd say if you're talking numbers, organically growing, bringing on staff, bringing on skill sets when you need the skill sets. Don't rush it, and ensure that you can keep them.
I guess that brings us on to a related question in that you mentioned bringing in people and bringing in different skill sets, especially when inflating your numbers or for short periods of time. How have you seen that managed well in the past in terms of how do you identify when to bring someone on, and how do you manage whether they're contracted or full-time, or how have you seen that managed that is good?
I don't necessarily think contracting is the first decision for any firm, because they're generally the fees for a contractor are going to be high. Their rates are going to be high. When do you acknowledge when you need to bring that skill set in? I imagine it's really down to what sort of project you're taking on, and if you acknowledge that you don't have the skill set and you want to win the project, do the project successfully, or service the client how they should be serviced, and you need that extra person, then you bring the person on for that. That I imagine would be a challenge as well, because once that person's there, it'd be good to keep them, not just get rid of them again.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier that you've worked in a diverse range of offices in terms of their size. Can you reflect on anything that greatly differs between a small organisation to a large one?
In a smaller firm, you will tend to be...
Just might wait for that bus. Sorry.
In a smaller firm, you will tend to be across the project from the very beginning to the very end. Naturally, if you're doing the full service and there's only minimal staff, that's just the way it's going to have to be. In a larger firm, or a medium-sized firm such as this, you will most likely have teams. You'll have a team that may be doing the design and developing the design, another team that might take that design and bring it up to a DA stage where you've taken the design and you've started to formalise it, but it's not yet resolved. And then you'll have a delivery team that will take that through from BA construction, and then hopefully construction administration, post-construction services.
Now we're jumping around in terms of the questions a bit, but it won't be evident in the video. But
sure.
This goes back to, I guess, the idea of hiring people and maintaining their employment for longer periods of time, especially in medium or larger firms. We see often the idea of organisations coming in, maybe tendering on jobs that they might not necessarily think is high profile or something like that. What sacrifices have you observed that organisations make in order to win work and maintain their numbers, things like that?
Well, first of all, I'd say that the biggest responsibility of any director, manager, or even sole practitioner is ensuring that you can keep your staff employed, ensuring you can keep your staff. I guess, to answer this question, fuck that, I'm going to start that again.
That was really good though. That was a good, I'm going to use that soundbite.
Yeah, which one?
Just how it was like the sole responsibility is to keep their staff. Like that could be the quote that leads into a whole topic. Like that was good.
Well, I think it's very important.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very important.
So what's your take on the cash cow sort of project that might not be glorious, might not be high profile design?
That happens. That happens. I know from other firms that depending on who the client is, and there's some pretty big clients out there. If they don't know you, why would they trust you? If you've not worked with them before and they don't know your designs, your service, your delivery, they've got no real reason to take it on board. However, if you can get your foot in the door, and it might be a small project, it might be a project that you do for cost, and you'll probably be in this situation where your first private job is probably going to be for family. John, you've done it yourself. You won't get a lot out of it. You won't get anything out of it. You get to cut your teeth. You get the experience. And if you've satisfied the client, albeit family member, then that would be your first, hopefully, referral. And I think within architecture, your reputation will take you places. The company's reputation will take you places.
You mentioned high-profile clients and large projects and things like that. What extra considerations do you have to navigate to win that sort of work? In terms of, obviously, there's differences when you're looking at types of insurance, QA, things like that. At a smaller scale,
larger clients or clients that have larger projects may insist that you have your PI insurance, which is, to use the term loosely, cashed up to a certain amount. It could be $20 million, could be $10 million, could be $5 million. So the bigger the project, possibly the bigger amount of PI insurance that you have to pay. And I'd like to think at that point, if you're paying for that amount, then your turnover is got to be probably substantial as well, which means you're probably a bigger firm too.
Yeah, sure. So do you think is it difficult to then transition from a firm that is just under that sort of revenue or that turnover to then start playing in that field? Have you seen that occur? Is it hard to take a firm from that point?
I'd say yes. Yes, I've worked in firms which have wanted to position themselves just under being a medium-sized firm because they felt that once they went into that threshold, then things got a little bit complicated where they would have to have a permanent office manager, a permanent HR, and you putting on one extra staff would actually be putting on 4 extra staff to make that leap. And at that point then, higher profile jobs to actually keep these guys employed.
Right. So that was an active decision.
It was an active decision to probably cap where they want it to be, which I think is probably a hard decision to make. I also think that it's probably a bad idea, again, to leap into a high profile project if you don't have the skill set, don't have the experience, and don't have the financial backing, i.e. the PI insurance there to cover you should things go wrong. Sure.
Do you have any questions?
That's a warm.
That's some of them.
Just keep rattling things off.
Yeah.
Just random things, because you might find that a question comes up with a decent answer that you can use another soundbite. So
Yeah.
It could be your experience, in my opinion, of your experience, which is shit.
That's on record now. In terms of winning work, what am I going to ask?
Growth is the thing.
Growth is a thing. You mentioned earlier an organisation that deliberately capped its growth or was happy with the position that it held in the
The
market.
numbers, they were happy with the numbers that they were in.
Sure. Do you feel that marketing plays a different role at a bigger scale of office? So, how do I ask?
Yeah, of course. You know, I guess it's down to that decision. If you want to be a bigger firm, you probably have to be very aggressive about winning jobs to keep these guys employed. And you know, no company is going to be successful if it doesn't market itself to a certain degree. You know, reputation can only take you so far. Reputation is good for repeat business. Reputation might get you noticed with new clients, but unless you could sell yourself to those new clients, then you're not going to get that from the door.
And do you think marketing changes at that level versus like a sole practitioner?
Yeah, I know, and I've worked for sole practitioners where marketing wasn't an issue because the reputation and the quality of their work was of such that kept them continuously employed, which then kept the team employed. But they were a small firm, you know, and they were happy with that, or he was happy with that. So that's a small firm saying, look, I'm not going to do marketing. A medium firm or a large firm can't not do marketing. You know, you will have to market, and you have to market aggressively if you want high-profile projects. And there's various ways you could do that. You know, if you're thinking of, and I always liked the idea of doing these design competitions because I thought that was a very good way of getting that side of your service out there, the design. You know, this is the company profile, this is the company ethos, this is how it's reflected through our design. And if you could be noticed, you don't necessarily have to win, but if you can be noticed, that's a good thing. Now, the downside to that is that all of those things is speculative work. You're not getting paid for it. So, you know, do you commit hours and weeks on it, or is it something you do for maybe 1 or 2 days, afternoons, maybe the occasional weekend? You know, that's probably a decision that has to be made. Well, that it will be a decision that will have to be made by that director, that firm, you know, if they want to use that sort of tool, you know, of the competition to advertise themselves, to get themselves noticed.
Any questions?
Can't think of any. Yeah, that's covered. It's covered everything that we wanted to. Covered.
I have a question, actually.
Mm-hmm.
This goes back to, you mentioned earlier having specified groups within the office that will deliver types of work.
Oh, yeah.
And I suppose that's down to efficiency, that those people...
That is down to efficiency. I'd probably say the only concern with that is that, in my opinion, the best architect is a well-rounded architect. You know, you don't specialise in anything, and I feel that because, you know, one of the greatest pieces of advice I was given when I was started off by one of the architects, one of the directors I was working for, was, if you can't get it built, call yourself an artist. And that's always stayed true with me. So I've always, you know, loved the fact that, you know, a good architect, a competent architect, I should say, not a good one, should be able to deliver fantastic design all the way through to fantastic service and fantastic post-construction, you know, service. So I think if you split an office up with little areas that deliver certain portions of the service, you've got to be very careful not to stifle the development of the younger guys and girls. You know, yes, okay, get them doing design work or assisting in design or being involved in design to give them that experience. Then put them over here and get them now involved in the delivery of a project. For their development, they need to know both clearly. Then, you know, take them out and put them over here, move them around. You know, if they stagnate, they're not going to enjoy it. You know, if they're constantly learning something new, then they're going to be happier people. And I think happy people are productive people.
Cool. Yeah.
You can ask questions, Cam.
Yeah.
You got anything?
No, those are the questions that we figured out. So, yeah.
Because Because how long is this video going to be?
It's 10 minutes overall, but
It's been going for
Yes.
15 now. But
Yeah,
that's,
but movies they like film this much.
Like we'll obviously be cutting.
And produce this much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely some good content that we'll take out of it. I'm just trying to think. Well, I've got you here. Like, what else I can ask you? Have you ever been in a company that was taken over by another company? Or
No, although that's an interesting one. A company that's been taken over another company. This is essentially this company.
yeah,
This company wasn't GSA prior. It was a different company.
yeah. So there's that acquisition model.
Very interesting model, in my opinion. Now, I can't give you the full background because I don't know it myself, but from my understanding, when the company was bought out, when the prior company was bought out, what those individuals gained, I dare say, is security. It's a constant pay packet. They gain a resource hub from the parent company that's bought them out. You know, they gain an overdraft. You know, to develop this company, it's going to cost money. That's going to have to come from somewhere. So you know, the parent company can provide. Of course, that's going to obviously flow back into the company, parent company. What you lose, your identity. You're no longer that previous company, you're this company, and there's a transition. It's not just going to be overnight, stop calling yourself this, call yourself that. And the reason why is that you've got clients who are familiar with the first company. You know, they've established a relationship, it's been a fantastic working relationship, it's been repeat business. To change your name overnight is to potentially lose these people. So the transition will always be a slow. There'll be a period where it'll be company A, company B together, and then eventually company A drops off and you're known as company B. Right? That transition happened here over 1 year, to my knowledge. This has actually been a very successful model which has happened for a very long time. There's a lot of architectural firms, like lawyer firms, who are a series of last names of the principals in charge, and the other thing you'd lose would be your contacts. Again, those clients are no longer your clients; they're the parent company's clients.
What does the parent company gain? Why is that a popular
Skill
method?
set and a foot in the door. You know, I like to think that no parent company is going to buy out another company